Hello, viewer, and welcome to Spotlight here on Hope TV, where you look and live. And on Spotlight, we always do our very best to bring to you persons who are doing a great work in the society and making a great impact to bring abundant life to God's people. And we are so delighted on this edition to be joined by the governor of Makueni, county number 17, and that is Professor Kivutha Kibwana. And he has been very kind to host us here in his office, and Governor, we are very delighted. Welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you.
You have a beautiful county.
Yes, it is very beautiful, particularly when it rains. It really is beautiful because it's flowering and it's green. So it is a beautiful county, and the people are equally beautiful. Of course, when you want to buy land here, it's advisable you come to buy it during the dry season because it is not as beautiful as now.
It's cheaper.
It's cheaper, and therefore you have a view. The people say we can sell you for this much, but when it's this green, then the price is higher.
It goes up by almost doubling, right?
Almost double. But we also encourage people to use the land and not to sell it aimlessly.
Okay. And you have done such a great work that your reputation as a leader, specifically as the governor of this county, really has preceded you. It's just a very romantic report. How do you feel about that?
Well, as a Christian, of course, whatever we do, we say that the glory goes to God, because you don't do things on your own. It is God who enables you to do them if you believe in Him. And that is really how I have operated in Makueni, how we have operated in Makueni. When we began this program, you began by prayer. And here, everything that we do, we begin by prayer. And indeed, even sometimes when we have visitors from the international community who are not used to prayer, we ask them, do you mind if we pray? And of course, because they are visitors, they accept.
I have to submit.
And even in terms of the people that we work with, we have been fortunate that in terms of recruitment, we have people who are of faith, Christian faith, so we have a population of Muslims. We have also the Hindu faith here at a place called Makindu. But the majority are Christians, and we are happy that we have people who work with us who are of faith, and therefore they bring their faith into the work.
Okay. We'll definitely talk a lot about that, about you, work, and faith. And I think it's just right for us to begin by hearing how you encountered your genesis with the Lord Jesus Christ. How did that relationship begin?
It began negatively. Why do I say negatively? Because initially, my parents, especially my father, practiced African traditional religion. So I remember medicine people being brought home so that they could have some incisions on you and they could protect you against all manner of things. I remember even some of those medicine people coming home and into a shopping center where my father had a shop. And one of them was saying he could treat. It was called treat. But that was the environment. There was the pouring of libations, invoking on ancestors and so on. So that was the context. And this was before Christianity had become embedded in our place. So that was very dominant. Of course, with the coming of AIC was also there. There was gradual conversion from African traditional religion, but it still lingered. There was doubling of Christianity, and then when when my parents thought that it was necessary, they would go back to African traditional religion. And I remember even much later, when I finished my doctorate from the United States, and I came home, and my father said, I still want to take you to a traditional practitioner, medicine man.
Treated.
To be treated so that, and those days, my father put it in a very funny way, so that more he can see you and you can become a big person. And I told him, no, I have Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ is enough. He treats me. I don't have to be treated by anybody else. And actually, I do wish that he also becomes your healer. He was my friend, so we could bandy words without him taking offense. And he argued, what's your problem? If Jesus treats you and the medicine person treats you, you have double treatment, so you are okay. And I told him, no. But from those early days, he didn't mind us going to Sunday school. And basically, it was ABC. So they didn't mind us going to Sunday school. So when we came to faith, it was not so much that we were encouraged by my father. One of my mothers, because my father had two wives, I have two mothers. One has passed on, my father has passed on. One of the mothers liked church and encouraged us. But for my father, when you go to Sunday school, it's good. If you don't go,
it's okay.
It's okay. You can look after goats.
There's work to do.
There's work to do. But for us as children, because we were many of us, ultimately we were 29 of us from two mothers.
29, right?
29. One mother 16, another mother 13. So for us, it was fun.
That's a constituency, when you think about it. Those are many votes that can make a difference.
Yes, those are many people. And of course, when we have grown up and everybody has their family, we are becoming grandchildren, so we are a big family. So for us children, when you these beautiful Bible stories, you are told these beautiful Bible stories. You are told about a Christ who will be there for you, come what may, whether there is no food at all. And those days, there were times there wasn't food. When you have problems, maybe you're being disciplined and you think it's unfair, so then Christ became a very, very special figure within our family. And of course, when we now went to primary school, and I went to a primary school which was sponsored by, first of all, AIM, where we have devotions, where we go now to church, and now, because I went away now to school away from my parents. So this is now different because in that particular locality, my aunt, whom I stayed with, would encourage. I can say that we came to faith initially as young people, as boys and girls, not so much because we were encouraged by our parents, but because we found reason. We found reason to accept Christ and to begin that particular journey.
It's amazing when you talk about the man Jesus Christ, and you resonating with what he was standing for from a very tender age, and that brings a connection with Jesus Christ that has grown to this day, right? As Christians, over the years, we meet different circumstances, we have different experiences, but one of the things we know is that we are supposed to keep growing.
Sure.
We're supposed to move from milk and go to hard food. And maybe you can tell us over the years some of the things that have been steady practices for you to keep you growing in the faith.
I think when I go to secondary school, I found she was an American lady who was a devout Christian. She was a woman of faith. She had stayed on the continent quite for a long time. And I remember she did the exam for driving, the driving exam. She did it 14 times because she would not bribe. And she took a lot of interest in terms of mentoring of the students. Even helped us to train to be Sunday school teachers. And I took a lot of interest in reading and studying the Bible.
Can you just refresh us the secondary school you went to?
Machako School. I went to Machako School from Form 1 to 6. So this was in the formative period of Form 1, Form 2, up to Form 4. So I think one of the lessons, because by this time now you can read well for yourself. It's not a question of people reading for you. And actually that's one thing that my mother always, because recently my mother again got saved. And one of the things she says is she was denied education and by my grandfather, because my grandfather wanted her to be married so that he could have cows and goats. So one of the things is our inability to read the Bible for ourselves. So in my early secondary school, with now the ability to read, that was one of the disciplines which I found very, 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 very important, because I could read for myself. Of course, in the classroom, we were also taught so that you begin to understand about Christ, you begin to understand about God the Father, the Holy Spirit, the various parts of our theology, our knowledge of our relationship with God. So we have fellowship. So we begin to the disciplines of prayer. So that is something you understand, you learn, you begin to practice. Then we would also, of course, when we go to teach young people in Sunday school, you would more or less begin to learn how to also bring other people to Christ, especially children. So there's that teaching now, that element of teaching. So in many ways, as one grew from how I described primary school, when we come to secondary school, sometimes we would be allowed to preach to other students, especially those who are in Christian Union. We would be allowed, because every morning we had a devotion. Teachers did it, but there are times that some students also would be allowed. So that was important. The fellowships and with other secondary schools, neighboring secondary schools. So that was also an aspect of growing. And during those days of Reverend Kayo, Joe, and we would people would come to school. They would be invited, speakers, and they would speak to us. And there was a lot of flurry of fellowships, and that was an important aspect for us.
Okay. All right. There sometimes seems to be a practice, a Christian practice, that tends to almost be endeared to you. Not that the others are not important, but you find somebody really loves to pray. You find somebody really likes to evangelize. You find somebody really likes to read or study, the Bible and Christian material.
Mm-hmm.
You find another person who never missed the fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
You find another person likes giving quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
what would you say if you were to single out a practice, a Christian practice that has really stood out for you, in a very significant way?
Mm-hmm. I think it's many. It is many because what you have described, and of course I just described reading the Bible, studying the Bible, prayer, but what you have described in terms of the disciplines, I think because over time I decided that it was necessary to not only just to be studying the Bible, to be studying other material, Christian material. I decided that I really wanted to study the gospel, to study, to really understand my faith, so that it's not an emotional faith. It is also grounded on knowledge of this God, this Christ, that is central to my life. So I took some time and went to theology school for about three years, when I was very much of an adult. Actually, when I was working in the office of the President. So that desire to really understand the Word, to understand my faith, our faith, that led me to not simply to teach myself, but to be taught by others, particularly those with superior knowledge. And so I went to African International University, what used to be called NEGEST, when I used to work for President Kibaki. And I remember him asking, "Professor, you have many law degrees. Why do you want this one?"
I would ask the same.
Why do you want this one?
Yeah. So what degree did you do?
I did a master's in theology.
Master's in theology.
Yes.
An MTH. Okay.
Yes. So then I told him, yes, I've studied law. I have studied a first degree in law, a second degree, a third degree, a fourth degree. But all this knowledge, the root of all this knowledge is theology. And even in antiquity, when people began to study seriously, they would study theology, they would study maybe astronomy, they would study maths. So this is really foundational. And I thought, because as a father, I am a pastor at home. My wife is a co-pastor. Particularly these COVID times, that was really, very important. So I thought I would be a better pastor at home if I really have this knowledge. Not that without the knowledge you can't be, but I thought this would assist me. And I also thought, because I was readying myself to become a governor, I had intentions. I had made a decision that I would try to be a governor. I thought I want to lead led by the Word. And therefore, if I have this knowledge, when I go to Makueni County, I'm also going to be a shepherd in this particular county. It might not be obvious in terms of, I will not call people and tell them, "Come here, we have a sermon now, and you listen to me, and you need to be saved," and everything. No.
And the language, there's a way.
And there's the language.
Have the guttural voice.
Yes, and that voice, and and so on.
Yeah.
So not that way, but if, for example, when we are beginning to do whatever it is, we say, let's call upon the name of God to be with us, to guide us. And people see that consistently that is happening. If people who work here, people can call on the name of Christ and say, "He's my Savior." Some of the aspects of transparency flow through that because one doesn't want to be associated with corruption, and yet simultaneously they are calling upon the name of the Lord. So there was therefore that aspect of when you study the word, because that's the initial question, was all these disciplines, what really do I think is very special to me?
Okay.
So that one of, studying the word as deeply as you can, and even getting instructed, so that when I come to Makueni, in terms of what I do, that can be reflected.
Okay.
I can, for example, we have development committees in Makueni from the village up to the county. We have 43 villages. And in those development committees, we say there will be representation from somebody of the faith. So, and of course, we say in a simple way, when you start whatever you want to do, people will pray for you. There's somebody to pray for you, and we know it's more than that. It's not just a prayer. I have come to think that one of the biggest churches in a rural situation is a funeral. Because people come to a funeral who don't go to church. And so they're there as they, bury their dead or a relative. And even there are some more, because sometimes before COVID, some food used to be offered, even if they're coming for some food. But the preacher preaches, and they are reached. Of course, many may be enriched by the gospel, but in that situation, the word, they confront the word. The word is served as well, and some of them, of course, usually there's no altar call in funerals, usually. But later on, somebody has that word deposited in them. And maybe at some future point, they will say, but I heard this. And maybe, I will of course die. Therefore, where do I want to, what do I want to happen to my life? So as a governor, when you come to this funeral and you are a believer, then you have an opportunity to also, in ways which are not like how the pastor will say it, but you also, you don't just talk politics. I don't talk politics in funerals. You are able to really augment what the preacher said, so that the people will also realize, even the governor has a similar message. So I've said all those things to really say that for me, the knowledge of the word, the doctrine, is very, very, very important. And this goes back even from my study of theology. It goes back to, and many people may not know this, that the defense of doctrine, theologians from Africa were very, very much instrumental in terms of the defense of doctrine from people, people who wanted to distort, the gospel. I think even people don't know that Mark was an African who wrote the gospel Mark. So that is an important focus for me.
Clearly, because even when you began about especially your high school life, the word came out very prominently.
Yes.
And so it's very obvious that you have a very intimate relationship. Of course, with other practices, but the word is very
giving prayer, because prayer must be second nature. Second nature to us, to a Christian, because that's how we converse with God, not just telling God what we want, but saying thank you, God, praying for other people, interceding. That's very, very, very important, especially also in the family context, not just when we go to church. That is critical. Giving giving in a broader sense, not just giving financially. Like when you really say, I want to serve people, not the way Christ did, but like Christ did, because you can't do things the way Christ himself did them. It's not. The man God was special, but we imitate him. So giving in terms of, like in an earlier life, when I was involved in constitution making in the 80s and the 90s, we were not paid and we worked at great risk, and that was giving. Even here in Makuene, if I had wanted, for example, just to make money, I would be a lawyer. Some of my students were lawyers, have done well for themselves materially. But here, because you want to serve God's people, you have to give. If you want to pursue sacrificial leadership, servant leadership, and that's what the word tells us, that if you get a position to lead, you have to lead as a servant, and not to ask, can I sit on the right side or the left side of Christ, as the two disciples did through their mother, Zebedee's sons. The mother was there, and then the Bible says Zebedee's sons, so it was still patriarchal society. So that really you give by doing all that you can to help people, of course, with all our faults.
Yeah.
But you do you do that.
Okay. All right. I think it's when we look at your, let me call it your public ministry landscape. It's a very large. You are a scholar. You have been in advocacy, civil society. You've worked in mainstream government. You've been so many governors, so many things, and there are many young people who are in the marketplace right now, and sometimes they struggle, to keep their faith in the marketplace. What would you tell them? What would you tell them in terms of how they can be able to sustain faith in the marketplace, and not just sustain the faith, but have an impact out of faith in the marketplace?
I think when you bring your faith to the marketplace, sometimes people could think that you are quote crazy, because some of the things that they want done, you are saying no. My relationship with Christ, my faith cannot allow. For example, people might tell you, this public money is here for free. Why don't we partake some of it? It happens in Nairobi. It happens,
Why are we suffering?
Why are we quote suffering? And the money is here. And I remember in my first time as governor, I was being asked by my MCAs. They wanted money, and I told them that this is not our money. This is the money for the people. And of course, there's a long story to that. There was acrimony at some point. I was almost shot at and all that. So there is that. There is those pressures. But my experience is when people realize that you can't bend and you are doing your work, they kind of grudgingly respect that. They kind of grudgingly respect that. Of course, there are some extreme situations where people might be frightened by that, because you're shining a light on them and they think you're exposing them, or they think you could expose them. And there are some adverse encounters where somebody might even lose a job. But the Lord who gave you that job, even if that were to happen, will still give you a job. So I think it's that example. It's that personal relationship which makes you different. And people see that difference. And sometimes they challenge you initially. They challenge you because they think you can conform to the worldly things that they are promoting. But when you insist And when you don't discriminate against them to say that, you are lost, I am found, and you pursue them. You pursue them so that you are still telling them that if you think there is a difference between us, this is the reason there is the difference. And I'm inviting you to encounter this transforming Christ. I'm inviting you to this personal relationship with Him. Of course, there are people of other faith, and we must respect, other faiths. You don't tell them that they are wrong. But from where you stand as a Christian, that's your message. So I would really say we are going through a very difficult period, not only in Kenya but on the continent, many places, where spirituality, where ethics, where morality are collapsing. And where you have societies that know when they invite God into whatever they are doing, they will prosper. When that happens, there is a renewal. Of course, we are waiting for another renewal in our country, in our continent, but the answer is not to give up, to say, I am going to be like the rest. Because when that happens, then one is doomed.
Yeah.
So I would still tell them that just, manifest your faith. Be proud of it without being negatively proud. You say that this is me, this is how I am. The reason I'm this way is because Christ is very significant in my life. And we will do the good things. I will work harder than any of you because that is also what, the Bible says how we are to work when we were placed in the Garden of Eden and subsequently. So there is no compromise.
It's a very strong point there that, it becomes, the faith has become who you are.
Sure.
That this is me. It's
Take
just the
me,
way I am.
Take me or leave me.
And you say something very interesting from your experience, that people sometimes will initially just reject you.
Yes.
But eventually, grudgingly, just accept who you are. And in the process, you can be able to explain yourself, even as they also explain themselves. We'll take a short break, viewer. We are talking to the governor of Makueni, Professor Kivutha Kibwana, amazing spiritual insights. And so we're taking a short break. Don't go anywhere. Stay with us. Again, this is Spotlight here on Hope TV, where you look and live. Viewer, welcome back. This is Spotlight, and we are talking to the governor of Makueni, that is Professor Kivutha Kibwana. What insights we are getting concerning his faith journey and his spirituality. And one of the things that you mentioned, Professor, was the conversation with the President Kibaki. You were working in his office, and then you want to study theology, and not just a short-term course. It's one thing to get into a Zoom course, or a webinar, but you were going for an entire program at the Negest at that time, African International University now. And I just want you to maybe to recall the conversation you had with the President Kibaki when you are going to take theological studies.
Because the work that we did as an advisor to him required significant time. So first of all, he must have thought that, okay, if I give this guy permission to go to school, we might miss some time in terms of the work. But more critically, he was thinking that this person has a first degree in law, this person has two masters in law, this person has a PhD. So why would they want to study theology? Of course, I told him that theology is the foundation. of everything that, and particularly law, because this is divine law, and the law that we study is secular law. So that was a philosophical argument that, you know, even my studying of theology will make me perhaps a better lawyer. But he thought that it was not, he couldn't initially understand why I just want to go this route. But again, because of course he was, and he is, I think, a very private person, he would not question you too much, and he would understand that this is something deep that you want, and if he had no serious reason for saying no, he would tell you, you know, you can do this. But what was interesting was later on, the university was in the process of getting a charter for a long time. So when they had fulfilled the conditions for the charter, he came to give the charter. And so before, of course, our office had received information about what the university is about, the usual thing that will be done before the president's visit somewhere to get full information. And so when he came and he found that the university was beginning to offer secular courses, you know, commerce and so on and so forth, he thought that theological schools should be hesitant to adopt other courses because the focus will be lost. Particularly where people will say we want the courses that will readily get us into the marketplace. Like teaching, like counseling, like, you know, those courses. So I remember him repeating that, and it was quite a challenge as I saw it. And I think if one studies seminaries or theological schools which have diversified, that sometimes leads to some loss to the theological aspect. And of course, when now you have, you know, young people with all manner of different cultures coming together and so on, that can interfere with the theological setting. But of course, one understands that these schools are having a problem of the students they attract. They may not attract a lot of theology students, and they want to survive financially. But I wish, if it's, for example, the Christian tradition, because like next, there was training of people from all denominations. I wish there are some schools which would be purely, you know, seminaries purely devoted to theology. Not that the pastors and so on who are trained there are not going to go into the world, so to speak, and influence it when they finish studying, but it is just to make sure that the focus of the institution, you know, because like we used to have, of course, chapel. You have chapel every week. Chapel every day, not every week, every day. We used to also have our small Christian communities of several students together. But when now you have other students who are not from that tradition, they begin to resist that.
Yeah, because they feel that it's not necessarily what brought them.
Yes.
Brought them there.
Brought them there.
Yeah.
Of course, one bridge would be to say, and this is happening, say that even if you are studying commerce or you're studying whatever else, there's a core of theology courses that you must take. I think that's a good thing. But I wish, I hope that there will be institutions that are simply focusing
on theological studies.
some may be mixed, but I wish some would simply, and that happens abroad. So that is the focus, and people go there have better time to concentrate and to really learn what they have gone there to do.
All right. That's quite an insight there. And also hearing President Kibaki's insight that has become now your conviction also over the years. Let's stay with the Bible that you love quite a bit. And there are many characters in the Bible. There are many books in the Bible. And sometimes when you read scriptures, you tend to gravitate towards either a particular character or a particular book, and you feel somehow that it mirrors what you're doing, maybe in a lifted kind of way. Would you say maybe a character in the scriptures that you relate with quite a bit, or a book in the Bible that you feel this really drives me quite a bit on your day-to-day life?
Of course, one doesn't pick one book and say that normally, because the word, all of the word is word.
True.
All of the word is word. Even things that look like they can't happen, but you can't say that any part of the Bible is not valid, at all. And in terms of, for example, of course, when the central character, even within the Old Testament, in terms of prophecy, in the New Testament, in terms of when now Jesus comes over the scene, and the revelation now that this is the Son of God, whom has been prophesied and who has been born, and who for 33 years has lived as man and is also God. I think that for children, that's amazing. From now, the earlier time, because the life of, even as a child, when he goes to the synagogue and he's teaching, he first of all he grew in stature, he grew very well, and you say, that's how I want to grow. And he can even teach, and people say, wow, how can he teach like this? And he's just a young person. Even the preachers of that time are saying, we can't believe this. And the entire therefore life. I think that's a central character, and that's the raison d'etre of our faith. So that is the central inspiration. But of course, there were characters who are human, like ourselves, because it was both man and God. Like the book of Nehemiah, when Nehemiah was in a lot of privilege. Working for a king is in a lot of privilege. And he gets a report that in his country, things are not good.
Did you say his country or his county?
Country.
Oh, because I thought you were serving with President Kibaki.
No.
And
Country.
You remembered your county.
That
Things are not going on well.
No.
And so...
Then the wall is broken.
Yes.
Many things are broken. So he asked for permission. And the king is very generous, because I think he must have been a good worker, the cupbearer. So he goes home, and with a lot of resistance, he leads into building the wall. And of course, it's building the entire society. He mobilizes people to volunteer. There are detractors and there are vicious, and they are, asking him to go to meet and so on. And it's because, even relatives trying to tell him, go meet. You are being asked to go and meet, because They want to kill him, and they don't want the rebuilding, the renewal. And eventually, the wall is built. The people, there is a renaissance. And even it's not just the physical wall, because in the people volunteering, something that they didn't think they could do before him coming from another country, they didn't think that they would do it. So now they believe now that they can do it, they're enabled, they can do it. And even beyond that, there is again a reading of the law of Moses, and there's also that building, the spiritual building. So I like the book of Nehemiah, and I like all of them, but I like that book because it also tells me, as a leader, you can also mobilize your people so that even Kenya, even if we say Kenya is broken, people can be mobilized. Before, the religious sector in the 80s and 90s was part of mobilizing Kenyans to rebuild their constitution. And I remember that was another encounter with the Ndingis, with the Njoyas, with the Muges, with the Okulus, with the, that caste of spiritual men and women. And actually, at the university, we had reached a point where also we were beginning to be confused and not follow Christ as, we used to. Because those days, there was confusion in the universities. But again, when God makes provision, and the NGO people, those days I was in the NGOs and the university, when again we start working together, and that's also where we began, they told us that if this is to work, we must pray. Don't think that your own effort is going to give you a constitution. So that was a rebuilding. Just like I believe there has to be a rebuilding now. There has to be a rebuilding. So I'm just focusing on Nehemiah.
Which is a very consistent model for you,
yes.
Which is quite quite visible even as you work now here.
Yes, and then I like Samuel.
Samuel, okay.
Samuel. I like Samuel because he's asked for a king, and he says, okay, if you want a king, because God has been the king, but if you want a king, God makes provision. He says, okay, they can have a king. And eventually, when Samuel is about to install that particular king, he is now talking about himself. He's talking about, can anybody say that the king is there, his sons are there, the people are there, even the Lord is there, because he says even before the Lord, can anybody say I took anybody's ox, donkey, did I take corners in a judgment? And all of them in unison say, no, you didn't.
It's a very high standard.
So that's a very high standard. And that's the standard, I wish our leadership would have. It's a very, very high standard. But I also, I like that. I like the courage of, Esther. Ruth is amazing. Ruth also is amazing, and even when she has opportunity to stay with her people, she says, no, I will go with you. Where you go, that will be my also place. And she's blessed. And even through her Christ, she's also part of the line, the lineage. So
quite a number of characters there that inspire you. Let's stick with Samuel a little bit, and his standards, very high standards. They're almost scary when you read that, and he's calling everyone to witness.
Yes.
And I think the courage of leaders today may not may not get there where you
Sure.
call everyone to witness whether what you're saying is true or it's not. But the standards there and come into your life, long life, very great service. Through it all, you know, God is present. But there's a word that is often used to describe seasons of sluggishness in the faith, and the word used is backsliding, right? And are there seasons in your life when you have been distanced from the faith? And what were those times, if they exist? Yeah.
As I tried to explain, when I was in the university, that was one time that one, again, it's the influence of those days when, you know, the universities, there was like a lot of talk about socialism. Not that socialism is a bad thing, or not that sharing when we work for whatever it is that we must have, that is not necessarily a bad thing. But during that period, I and others, we deviated from our faith. Not that it was a total deviation, but...
Governor, it's okay, even if it was a total...
True. No, when I mean total,
I get,
yes, and that I also accept that. I also accept that we got into, you know, drinking, a lot of not very proper life, you know, into a lot of that. But I think because of the background, one kept of knowing that this is not the correct path. And I was able to personally overcome that and to say that this is not how I want to, you know, lead my life. This is not what I have learned. And I think that accounts for the later transformation coming back to my faith. So those are moments of reflection, because you must therefore understand that you can lose your faith if you don't guard it. You can lose your faith if you don't guard it. And so I look back to those moments of, you know, sliding and so on, and say, I don't want to get there again.
Yeah, it's a prodigal son. When the prodigal son came home, he never left again. When he returned home,
yes.
he stayed home. And
yes,
so, as you said, there are times of reflection.
And the father even favored him, and the other son wouldn't understand. Why do you favor this prodigal son than me? And I've been here with you.
Well, thanks for being honest about that. Also, in the Christian journey, as you have encounters with God, there are some that are really memorable, and the scripture calls them miracles. And I know that your story is rich with a lot of encounters, but would you maybe lift up a few, maybe two, that you can say, these are miracles I have seen with my own eyes in my life?
I think one miracle was, as a young person, I had to leave my parents to go to school. And that was not usual. One uncle said that, let us take this child to another school, because the school I was in had standard 1 and 2. And when you reached standard 2, there was no standard 3. You went back to standard 1 and then did 1 and 2 again. So many of the pupils we were together just left school. But this uncle comes and convinces my father that I should be taken to another school. And my father accepts that. Later, there were some of my brothers and sisters where he didn't accept. So part of my going to school, therefore, it was that miracle. And then I went to a household where my aunt was very, very, very poor. So poor that, I have said before, I only saw her counting coins. I never saw her counting paper money. When she went to Emali, the market near home, she came back with bones. So that was meat for us. And in actual fact, when a goat died in the village or a cow, the children we celebrated. When the grown-ups were angry or not happy that their property, their cow, had died, because now there was going to be a feast. There was going to be Christmas, in quotes, for us. So I didn't report to my parents, all these problems, that sometimes we would stay without food. And actually part of why I wanted to go to school, I said I must study so that I get a job. I wanted to be a teacher after study it, like my teachers, some of my teachers, so that I get a job and I can have food. So I was studying just to have food in my stomach. So I think it was a miracle, because many kids during that time, their school was aborted. I think that was a miracle. Therefore, how I came to school, because many kids lost that opportunity.
And the school has turned out to be so many things for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then twice I missed death, because God stood and wanted me to continue with life, because there were assignments I was to do. In the 90s, during those days of multi-party politics, I was abducted from home, and I was really, as I drove and I saw there was some car behind me and it was really hurrying, and I drove faster, I was able to reach home. And therefore, when I was abducted, there was alarm raised, and even some embassies contacted and so on. And I think whoever had captured me realized that whatever they wanted to do, they couldn't do. And of course, as you're in that car, and our watchman also was taken into the car. So instead of me alone, so we were two. Of course, one is praying, and we were dumped in a forest, and nothing was stolen from us, and we were saved. God saved us. That was a miracle. More recently, at the county assembly, when in the first round, when there were those conflicts about my saying, no, we cannot just have money for ourselves. The money must be preserved for our people. There was supposed to be a meeting. And when I went to that meeting where the senator, MPs, MCAs were, it was said that we wanted to storm the place and harm them. And as a result, some of their security started shooting at us. And I was standing with my chief of staff, who is now the speaker of the county assembly. He was shot at, and really there was also divine intervention, because the bullets grazed, it had hit the gate, and then it grazed his head, and it went upwards instead of direct, and he was to my left. To my right was my assistant, my security assistant, who was shot in his leg. Somebody before me, the sergeant at arms, was shot in the stomach. Another pastor was shot. So everybody around me were shot. Unfortunately, because God intervened, nobody died. But the sergeant at arms was quite hurt. Another policeman behind me was shot at, and I was there because I couldn't imagine that anybody would want to kill us. So it was like a child playing with a snake, and the child doesn't know that this snake is dangerous. I thought they were just shooting in the air, maybe to frighten people, whatever it was. So later, when I reflected, I knew that God had said, no, you are not going to do this evil thing.
And because of that, you're still here?
Yes.
You're still here?
We are here together.
Wow. All
yes.
right.